I am going to introduce our speaker of the evening for Get to Know Your Rights under Americans with Disabilities Act. So Jan Garrett currently serves as the Deputy Director of the Pacific ADA Center at the Public Health Institute. The Pacific ADA Center exists to help people understand and apply disability rights law. Jan has over 25 years of experience providing guidance and training on the ADE and other disability rights laws. As a person with a disability herself, Jan has a deeply personal understanding of why disability civil rights are so important. Also with us tonight is my esteemed colleague from PHP Sister Family Empowerment Center down in San Diego, Joyce Clark, and she'll be helping out with the Q&A and the chat this evening. So apologies again for not having the right title slide, and Jan, please take it away. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Let me get this share. Okay, you can see that, right?
Wonderful, yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us at PHP to present from the Pacific ADA Center, and we will talk about what is the Americans with Disabilities Act and how can it help your family members with disabilities. So I am Jan Garrett, as Alyssa said, and then tomorrow night, Oscar Gonzalez from the ADA National Network will be presenting in Spanish, this same presentation, and the slides will be in Spanish as well tomorrow. So our services at the Pacific ADA Center are free, confidential. So if you contact us, we won't tell anybody else. And you are not required to be documented in order to be, or to be a citizen to receive this information. So if you are undocumented, we can still assist you with any and all information that we have. And we don't do enforcement, so we don't report anybody to any other government agencies. So we offer technical assistance by phone and email at this 800 number, 1-800-949-4232. We also answer emails at info@adapacific.org. And we typically try to get back to people within a day or two. So please feel free to contact us. And that phone number, you should reach a live person, or at least they will call you back within a day or so. We also provide trainings, as we're sort of doing now, a lot on Zoom, sometimes in person, webinars, conferences, etc., on ADA topics. And we provide materials on the ADA and other disability rights laws. I encourage you to go to our website, which is at the bottom of the slide, and it'll be on the last slide again as well, adapacific.org. It's we redid it a few months ago. It is in plain language, so it should be easy to understand and read. A lot of times these laws can be very difficult, even for lawyers to understand. So we tried to make the website easy to navigate and put it in plain language and make it as accessible as possible. So we encourage you to go to our website and check it out after this training, of course. So I'm going to also tell you that what my disability is. I was born actually missing all 4 of my limbs. So I use a power wheelchair for mobility. And I am a white woman with gray hair and light blue glasses wearing a patterned dress, tropical patterned dress. I know Alyssa's in Hawaii. I'm not in Hawaii right now, but I look like I'm in Hawaii because I'm on a patterned dress. And my white background makes me look a little bit like a ghost. So that's what I'm doing for Halloween. This is my costume. I'm a tropical ghost. Anyway, so why is it important to know about the ADA? You and your children have rights to access everything, and you have rights to access. And so this allows people that are covered by the ADA to access their communities. So in other words, ADA allows you to access school buildings and city programs, including recreation programs, transportation, healthcare services, all kinds of different things that are both public and private. The ADA allows you to access. And the ADA is a civil rights law. So, what are civil rights? Those are individual rights guaranteed and protected by the US Constitution and laws passed by Congress, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the ADA. And civil rights laws protect you from discrimination. So, what is a disability? What can you actually get from the ADA if you are a person with a disability? And so it's important to know how the ADA defines disability. And the ADA says you have a disability if your body or brain works differently from most people. Sometimes you can see a disability and sometimes you can't. In fact, 96% of the time, people with disabilities have invisible or non-apparent disabilities. 1 in 4 Americans, or the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, estimates it's about 27% of Americans have a disability. And many people don't know they have a disability or that their family members or friends have disabilities. And they definitely don't know what rights might be protected under the ADA if they are someone with a disability or they know someone with a disability. So examples of disabilities that are covered by the ADA could be people who have trouble walking. Let's say it takes someone without trouble walking 15 minutes to walk half a mile, but someone who has difficulty walking, it might take them 45 minutes to walk half a mile. So that would cover you under the ADA as substantially limited in the major life activity of walking. So trouble walking. People who use wheelchairs can be covered. People who can't see well or can't see at all are covered. So they have vision disabilities. People who can't hear well or can't hear at all. In other words, they have hearing disabilities. Also, people who have trouble thinking or learning or concentrating can have disabilities. Also, people with mental health, neurological differences can have a disability. So, neurodiverse people, people with autism, have a disability. So, major life activities that can be covered by the ADA when people are limited in those are there's a big list here, but there are things that you might think of normally, like walking and seeing and hearing and speaking, but also breathing and eating and sleeping, performing manual tasks, lifting and bending, caring for yourself, learning, thinking, and concentrating, and even working. All of these can be major life activities and they can be limited. And that means that you are a person with a disability if any of these is substantially limited. And that makes you a person with a disability under the ADA. So, more examples of disabilities are people who are in pain all the time, also known as chronic pain. Again, that's a non apparent or an invisible disability, but it's a disability. There are also people who have problems with their major organs, like their brain or their bowels or their lungs or their heart or their bladder. They don't work right all the time. If they have major problems with those, then they are considered a person with a disability. They can also have a health condition or a diagnosis like cancer, diabetes, autism, arthritis, or asthma. You can also include long COVID among the types of things that are covered by the ADA as a disability. People are having symptoms of long COVID now. It may be respiratory symptoms, it may be brain fog. They can't think as easily or concentrate as easily as they used to. So that is now considered a disability under the ADA. You can also be covered by the ADA for discrimination if you are close to someone who has a disability, like a child, a parent, the person you're married to, the person you're a partner with, or someone that you know and are good friends with and hang around with. Only qualified applicants and employees under the employment section of the ADA are entitled to reasonable accommodations at work. So the ADA would not require an employer to modify the leave policy for an employee who needs time off to care for a child with a disability. So at work, it has to be your disability to get a reasonable accommodation. But Family and Medical Leave Act, which is a different law that we won't get into, may give you leave and time off to care for your child that has a disability. So in order to get ADA leave, you have to have a disability yourself under your job. But for your child, that the ADA does not give you an accommodation for their disability. However, it does say that if you are associated or close to somebody with a disability, you can experience other types of discrimination and be covered by the ADA. Questions about what the ADA covers or who the ADA covers? Don't know if we're seeing any questions yet.
I don't think we have any questions yet, Jan, and
Okay.
we could just go right ahead through the end of the presentation and then take the Q&A at the end.
Oh, I do see a hand raised. Should we answer that or should we go on?
No, I think I prefer to have the Q&A in the Q&A because we like to have the recording. As it is, we'll edit this out. Okay.
Okay,
thanks.
Diane, if you can put it in the Q&A, if you're able to, that would be great. Or maybe we can answer it.
Oh, we'll get you later. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what does the ADA cover? We just talked about who the ADA covers. What does the ADA cover? People with disabilities have to be included and have the same chances as everyone when you're applying for jobs and you're working at a job, when you're using state and local government programs and services. So that would be like state government, city government, county government programs and services. And also when you're going into and buying things and getting services from businesses and nonprofits, places that are open to everyone. All of these things will grant you an ability to have an equal opportunity to take advantage of having employment, having participation in state and local government programs, and accessing private businesses and restaurants and private nonprofit services. So at work, the ADA says that people with disabilities must be treated the same as people without disabilities. At work, when you're in hiring, firing, training, pay, promotions, benefits, and leave, all of those areas, all throughout the employment process. And employers can make reasonable accommodations to make sure that people with disabilities can apply for and do their jobs. So there are lots of examples of reasonable accommodations. There are as many examples as there are people in the United States. But some examples of reasonable accommodations at work could be allowing somebody to have a different schedule, providing job coaches to help people learn their job, equipment like certain special computer or special software on a computer that could help with the job, sign language interpreters for meetings, things like that are all examples of reasonable accommodations that people with disabilities can get on the job or when they're applying for a job. So for state and local government services, so again, that would be state government, county government, city government, transportation services that are public. A person with a disability must be able to go inside any building or an outside area like a park, like a city park or a county park, and use any service that is run by a state and or local government. So you must have access to those programs, services, and areas that are offered by state and local governments. So examples of services that are covered by the ADA that are offered by state and local governments can include public schools, state and local government health centers and clinics. So some health centers and clinics are private, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the public accommodations in a minute. But some hospitals and clinics and healthcare centers are actually operated by the city or the county. And so they would be covered under state and local government services. Public libraries are covered, summer recreation programs, public housing, public transportation, like buses, trains, paratransit, light rail, and subways. And also state and local government websites. There is a new rule from the U.S. Department of Justice that enforces the ADA that says that all state and local government entities, all Title II covered entities, have 3 years. It's actually 2.5 years now. It was 3 years from last April to make their websites accessible. All their websites and their mobile apps, if they have any mobile apps, they have to make those accessible by April of 2026 for large entities. And for smaller entities, they have until April of 2027. So state and local governments have to change the way they normally do things. So their policies or how they normally carry out their programs and services so that somebody with a disability can easily use their programs and services. So these reasonable modifications, examples, are something like letting someone with diabetes eat food in the library when usually no food is allowed, because that person might get low blood sugar and they may need to be able to eat something in the library. Now, I'm sure the library will ask that they clean up after themselves, but they are often allowed to bring food in as a modification if they tell the library staff they need it for their diabetes. Also, letting a person bring a service animal with them, even when there's no pets, that's a no pet policy. You can modify that policy and you must do that for legitimate service animals. So in addition to state and local government services and employment, the ADA also covers businesses and private organizations like private nonprofits that are open to the public. And what the ADA says is that people with disabilities must be able to buy things from, go into, and or use the services of a business or a private nonprofit organization that is open to anyone. That means you should be able to go into clothing stores, grocery stores, nail salons, restaurants, all private museums, all those things that are privately owned, including private nonprofit services, are covered by the ADA. So, like I was just saying, examples of private entities that are open to the public could be grocery stores and other types of stores, restaurants, movie theaters, doctor's offices, gyms, nonprofit organizations. All these can be private entities or organizations that are open to the public, and they are covered by ADA. And they say you have to allow people with disabilities to be there and take advantage of their goods and services. So for businesses and private organizations, they have to make reasonable modifications too, just like we learned about with the state and local governments. So private businesses and private nonprofits must change the way they interact with a person with a disability if they can't easily buy stuff from them or use their services. So a store must leave enough space, for example, for a person in a wheelchair to move around and ask for help from the staff there if they can't reach something. I do that every week. I go to the grocery store and I ask for help from the staff to help me get my groceries and take them, be able to put them in bags, and then I can take them home. My husband does the cooking. I do the grocery shopping. So that's how I do it, is working with the staff at the grocery store. Also, a movie theater must have special seating that's easy to get to for people who have a hard time walking because of a disability. Movie theaters also need to have captioning and audio description as well. Service animals. Service animals are a big area that a lot of people wonder about. So, service animals are dogs, any breed and any size of dog, that are trained to perform a task that is directly related to a person's disability. Examples of tasks that service animals may perform, and these are again just examples, um, could be a person who has epilepsy and that dog is trained to detect the onset of a seizure when a seizure is coming. And then they can help the person remain safe during the seizure by staying with them. And if the seizure is going on too long, they can begin barking and get somebody to come over and help. Otherwise, they would not normally bark. Also, how do you know if a service animal, if an animal is a service animal? You can say, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Businesses, nonprofits, state and local governments, they cannot ask for any certification or documents that say that a dog is registered, licensed, or certified as a service animal. There is no such thing as a certified service animal. You can ask that if the dog has had its vaccinations, which almost all counties require in the United States. And you cannot require that the dog show you what it does. You cannot require that it demonstrate its task, or inquire about the handler's disability. You are not allowed to ask more about that. Only the two questions. Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? What work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Okay. And then what is retaliation? So an employer can't fire or punish a person for asking for their ADA rights at work. And similarly, government agencies, businesses, and nonprofit organizations can't punish someone for asking for their ADA rights from those entities either. So, for example, if you had a problem with a city recreation program and you asked for reasonable modifications and they had to give it to you, even though they didn't want to during the summer camp program, well, next year, that city can't say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't let you come back now to the summer program because you asked for modification last year. No, that would be retaliation, and you cannot do that. So, Maria is an administrative assistant at a large corporation, and she has a documented disability that requires her to take periodic breaks to manage her condition. She has a reasonable accommodation under the ADA to adjust her break schedule accordingly. And the employer grants the accommodation, but they soon start to treat her differently. After Maria's accommodation is approved, her supervisor begins to give her negative performance reviews, even though her work quality and her productivity is really consistent and she's doing well. Her supervisor checks in on her work more than usual and criticizes mistakes that are often really small or were overlooked before. And eventually, Maria's supervisor begins to hint at a potential termination. In other words, they're hinting that they might fire her if her performance does not improve, even though her performance has not gotten worse or declined. So that's an example of what could be retaliation on the job. This is also a scenario about job coaches. So a job coach can assist somebody with a disability to learn and accurately carry out their job duties, their essential job duties. Job coaches provide one-on-one training tailored to the needs of the employee. So an example could be a grocery store hires a courtesy clerk who has Down syndrome. Due to their disability, they have difficulty bagging similar items quickly, like all the frozen items together. With limited staff for training, the store hired a job coach to show this new courtesy clerk how to match the items. And after 2 weeks, the clerk was able to do the job independently and no longer needed the job coach. An employer may be required to allow a job coach paid by a public or private social service agency to assist an employee at the job site as a reasonable accommodation. And just because this example says they only stayed for 2 weeks, it doesn't mean that's all that they need to be allowed. It just depends on the job and depends on the person and how quickly they learn. So state and local government programs could be a child with food allergies. And if they're participating in a day program where lunch is provided, if they have a food allergy, the parent could request an accommodation or modification for their lunch, and the park program could provide an allergen-free lunch for the child. Also, a child on the autism spectrum may need a quieter space to retreat or to go if they become overwhelmed. The park would designate a quiet area and make sure staff are trained in understanding and supporting kids who are on the autism spectrum or who are neurodiverse. So, other important disability laws include the Fair Housing Act, which is for private apartments and condominiums, not usually single family homes, but for private apartments and condominiums, the Fair Housing Act says you cannot discriminate against people with disabilities, and you can have service animals and emotional support animals in housing under the Fair Housing Act. The Air Carrier Access Act helps people with disabilities travel on airplanes. So again, that's a different law. Airplanes are covered by Air Carrier Access Act, not by ADA. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that, helps children with an identified disability receive special education and related services to address their individual needs. And then Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act requires that schools that receive federal funding, and almost all of them do, they have to provide students with a free and appropriate education, just like IDEA, but maybe those students don't qualify for IDEA services. So I wonder if any of you can think about whether the ADA applies to your life or your child's life, or maybe a loved one's life. And do you think the ADA applies to any other of your family members? So I'm leaving these slides with you, and these are some helpful resources. Again, our website at the Pacific ADA Center, the ADA National Network, and Parents Helping Parents obviously has a great website.
We want to thank Jan so much for her time and her energy and for her lifelong compassion and passion for the work that she does. So thank you, Jan, for being with us tonight. Thank you, Joyce, for helping with the Q&A and just for being your lovely self. I love it when we get to do things together.
I know.
And thank everybody who came.